Kiernan O'Brien, writer, director, and actor in The Wallpaper. Wow. How do you feel?
You know, I it's so funny because I was an actor first and then I moved into writing and directing, and I feel like it seems like I was making myself some sort of vehicle, but I was like, I think I have to like I don't know anybody else. And
Yeah,
I can't afford to bring on like an actor. So the acting part of it was honestly like the bottom for me. I did not want it to be like my star turn or anything like
right.
that. But you know, that
Yeah.
that happens. I do hope I can get actors in the
Oh,
future.
I'm sure you will. It's a very well done film, and I'm sure you'll have no problem getting actors on your next project. It is definitely a disturbing film. And as a slight aside, I also acted in my first film, so I know the deal. Your acting is very compelling in the film, and then you also had the challenge of writing and directing it. The first question of Play It Forward: what was that kernel, that germinal idea that spawned this work in you, in your own psyche, in your own heart?
Mhm. I I wasn't sure I was going to write and direct, and then I actually read a different short story that I instantly thought could be like a modern day thing that I do hope to someday make. Um, but I remember when I was talking to my dad about that, he asked if that would maybe be made with a trans woman. And I wasn't sure, but then I moved on from that idea and found the Yellow Wallpaper. And when I was reading it, I instantly understood a connection to transness and to um like the metaphor there of you know this being kind of a disturbing story about a woman's mental health and other people kind of refusing to understand the nuances of it. I instantly saw a parallel there, um, between that and I feel like transness being so complex and weird, and how it can be very difficult for people who are not trans to understand that. And it's so easy to boil it down to just you transition medically and then it's kind of over and you don't have to think about it anymore, when in reality that's never really the case. It's always still there. It's always something you still kind of think of. And I think I appreciated in the original story that um that it's doing what all good horror is in the essentially, which is about anxiety. It's about something that is very real. It's a very heightened genre, but it always represents something that a real fear, a real anxiety, and you just add a bunch of metaphors in basically to depict it. And I realized I hadn't really seen anything that showcased the anxiety of gender dysphoria. Um, and I wanted to make something like that. And I saw a parallel here in the original story. And so I decided to adapt it.
Okay, far out. So, definitely have some follow-ups there. Can you define and explain transness and gender dysphoria?
Sure. I, so I transitioned when I was really young, um, but I was assigned male at birth, um, and transitioned to be a woman. And I think the interesting thing about that was because I transitioned young and because I was privileged enough to kind of go through it all pretty young and go, if I assumed for most of my life that that would sort of be the end of it all. Um, and then
Once you
just
transitioned, you mean?
yeah, that would sort
Yeah,
of just then it's
you're
over,
done.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and you don't ever kind of even have to think about it again. Um, and then, I mean, dysphoria is basically the feeling of kind of feeling out of a feeling out of place in your body, or feeling
Wow.
out of place in the whatever sex or you were assigned.
Right.
Um, and it's funny because that used to be the way that they would prescribe you. I think it might honestly still be prescribe you with hormones and stuff. Is that it was a mental health issue that you were diagnosed with, gender dysphoria,
Mm.
and the treatment for that was hormones. But it's interesting because I feel so that is everything is sort of essentialized down to the medical stuff, and that's the treatment for it, and that's the solution is like hormones and then medically transitioning, and that once you do all of that, gender dysphoria is done, and
Mhm.
but I found that that anxiety was not some it's not something that ever totally goes away. Obviously you have it's like good days and bad days, but I found it to be very similar to regular anxiety. Of course you're going to feel anxious sometimes, and of course, you know if you have if you have anxiety, if you or depression, even that's never going to just be solved completely regardless of what you do. um and I find it interesting that gender dysphoria is not always looked at with the exact same nuance.
Mm, mm. You mean by the current establishment of psychiatrists, psychologists, medical clinicians that help in the transition? They also feel that, okay, well, once you're transitioned, it's done.
Well, I think no, I think they I think one, it almost makes sense that they would think that a little bit more because that's their job. But I've also
Yeah.
found that even part of I thought that way. I thought that it
Right.
was done, and I found some, people who are not trans felt, would of course kind of think that's what that is, that there's this clear cut way of ending that kind of dysphoria, that's what you want, and then you achieve what you want, and you're happy, you've
Right.
and I think I basically with this I wanted to make something that was about what happens after the
Right.
happily ever after, in a
Right.
way of
Right.
what happens next,
I get it. I
because
get it.
it's still there.
So it sounds like what you're exploring, and that's really, that's part of this. What is the inspiration for it? See, I gotta admit, that was lost on me when
Mhm.
I watched the movie, because I just watched the movie and I, see this young couple. I had no idea that it was a transgendered person. I mean, when you had, that shot or the scene with the needle, I didn't know. I was like, oh, is it vitamin B? Maybe it's vitamin B deficient, or maybe it's like, uh, insulin or something. So I just saw, a boy and a girl, a young man, a
Mhm.
young woman. Um, but now that you give it that background for me, and maybe I just missed it, I'm like, oh, so it's like that angst that you live with, that you hope this thing would be over. Now you be accepted into society or socially, whatever, just not have to deal with it. And it's still something that is bringing on a certain level of anxiety that you're still dealing with, even though on the surface of everything, it's done.
Yeah.
And I think everybody can relate to that. Everybody can relate to that kind of, problem that you hope to address, and that you just have to live with whatever it is in your own psyche until and maybe you don't move on. Maybe we just have that feeling that, we can move on, and that you don't. And I certainly can, relate to the anxiety lately. Mine's been off the charts. And and that, frustration leading to aggression, and and then that scene,
Mm.
where it turns in the movie. I guess the next question is, you know, the metaphors and the themes that you're playing with and the message, if you could either say, when I work, and I'm kind of hesitant to ask filmmakers this because I know some filmmakers are like, well, I like people to figure out for themselves what's the message of the movie or whatever. It's like, okay, fine. But when you're going into something, I find that in my own work and when I read or observe something, there's some truth. There's that kernel of truth that you try to build a plot or a narrative around and build some, structure around it, whether you're exploring it to some extent, you're exploring it, and then it comes out at the end, and you're more informed into what you looked at into, but there's some kernel there that is true. So, what is the truth of the message of the movie as you see it now?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I feel like it kind of that was the one thing that never really changed, which is that I wanted to talk about that feeling of nobody understanding what exactly what exactly you're going through, and also at the same time showing showing this anxiety of gender dysphoria as something that will not always, probably will not ever go away, but learning to, number one, kind of cut out the things cut out the things in your life that make you feel kind of crazy, that make you feel like it's a that there's something wrong with you. And then number two, embracing the lack of certainty, and that's part of the beauty of life. And of course, that is going to create a lot of anxiety, Part of the whole floating metaphor, and then at the end she's floating in the water, is that she's spending the entire time saying there's nothing concrete going on, and that gives me a lot of anxiety. I don't feel secure. Um and this is the that's being trans is part of the reason she doesn't feel very secure. But there are many ways in which I think as humans we just are not feeling okay and secure in ourselves. And I think at the and so the idea of floating without standing on like solid ground
Mm,
is something that is so awful to her the entire movie. And then I wanted it to, at the end, be something
mm,
extraordinarily peaceful
mm,
that she can finally embrace.
that's really cool. Yeah,
So
that's
I
very
guess
cool.
the message of it is the embracing of the lack of certainty, because if you if you don't stand on solid ground, it feels scary, but then I feel like the possibilities are sort of endless.
Yeah, if you don't stand on solid ground, it feels scary, but the possibilities are endless. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, freedom. Um, well, that's cool. So, it's funny that she pummels her boyfriend to
Mhm.
get to that point. So, what do you see that representing?
I think that the boyfriend represent I had no interest in having the boyfriend be like not accepting, or in a very, I feel like tradition I feel like a lot of the time we see um the dynamic of a straight man and a trans woman, and it's very like he wants to keep her a secret, he's embarrassed that he loves her, and I wasn't interested in that dynamic because I think it's kind of played out. um and I also have more interest in representing the fact that you can have a good normal relationship. But what I wanted him to represent is actually a well-meaning person not getting it of like somebody who actually wanted to help, but
Yeah.
he just like can't. And I think a big so I wanted the ways in which he fails to be more subtle and
Mhm.
not have it be this thing we've seen
Yeah.
kind of over and over again.
You know
So,
what? I'm sorry to kinda chime in there,
no,
but I'm inspired to say it's cool. It's really cool. I get what you're saying in terms of, like, just a well-meaning, but it's also you can flip that around. Like, I really his character is so compelling because now in the new light of seeing, it, for me, it's like he can also represent this other side, and the other side is it's not just not getting it, but it's not getting it because there's nothing to get.
hmm,
Meaning, he's just so accepting of it, it's just like, what's the big deal?
yeah.
It's just, what is there? Like, he's just so accepting, and what a wonderful place that is, for the character, the main character to get to,
Mm.
you know?
Yeah, and it's I think that's also part of her anxiety is she doesn't understand why she feels so upset by what he does. You know what I mean? She doesn't it's like, well, he's so lovely and accepting that what is like what's the problem?
Right.
Why can't you just be happy? But I think I wanted it to be that the thing she's feeling anxious about in terms of gender is so nuanced that he doesn't that he's not able to actually understand. And in the original short story, it's very similar, where the lead character is dealing with postpartum depression, and her husband is just like, okay, sit in the cabin, don't do anything, don't even write or what or anything. Um, because I think he's applying this sort of overly simplistic view on someone's mental health, um, of just do this and then it's fine, you're done. And I think I wanted him to sort of be representative of that, of somebody just like putting a really overly simplistic
Yeah.
solution onto a very complicated thing. And though and I think I needed um because he's representative of an overly simplistic solution, he kind of needs to she needs to have some power of removing that from her life. So in a way, the whole ending scene is pretty much just metaphorical of her striking striking the root of her problem down, which is not even that she feels anxious. It's that she is being told how to solve her problems. As she's being told how to stop floating, and instead she needs to cut that oversimplification out of her life and then begin floating, I guess.
Yeah. Cool. Um, in hindsight, after making the movie, how long ago did you finish it?
About a year ago now.
About a year ago.
Yeah.
What did you learn? How have you changed?
That's yeah, oh my god. In so many ways. I feel like um one I it was funny because I was acting in so much of it, but I had a couple moments when I wasn't, and I have to like I rem it was so interesting how quickly it felt like the clouds like parted, and I was so able to be decisive and communicative when I was just directing, and even in pre-production when I was just talking about it and when I was just explaining this um, to the team. I realized, I mean, one, I realized it kind of makes sense why people don't always act, why people say it's a bad idea to act while you're also directing. Um, but also, it really taught me a lot about wanting to move behind the camera pretty much exclusively at this point. And also wanting to realizing that I have a lot of, this was a trial by fire. I think I was frankly naive about how much work directing really can be. But because of that, because I didn't wait till I felt ready, I just sort of did it. I think that that meant I was able to I had to. I didn't have a choice. I had to solve problems. I had to be a leader, and I think that I learned that that was it within my capabilities. Um, and same with writing something. You know what I mean? That I didn't know I could sort of construct a story before this. Um, and I think I just gained a lot of confidence in the sides of this industry that require your brain. Like, you know what I mean? Um, and I gained a lot of assurance that I can put something together in that way. And I also just learned so much about collaborating, and I learned so much about, you know, even things like like cameras and um,
Yeah.
how to be specific about asking for what I want. And I think that's something that's very powerful and empowering,
Yeah.
um, to be able to feel that you can, you know, to be able to feel that you can um, get something you want done and on your own terms.
Kiernan O'Brien, thank you so much for joining us on Playing It Forward. Definitely looking forward to more of your work.
Thank you so much for having me. No, this is so fun.
Cool. I'm glad you liked it. All right. Well, bye for now, and we'll keep you posted. And looking forward to staying in touch.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, have a good one.
Great to meet you. Bye bye.
Yeah, it was nice to meet you.
Thank you.